Dream Reapers, Chapter 3. Mad Dreaming. Overseas, in a small rainy country, the sun finally showed its face to the land. The beams of light illuminated shimmering streets and roads. Everything was still wet from the rain. Much had fallen during the nighttime, but that was normal for the citizens of this country. The poor drunkard, who would have ridden back home on the bike during the late hour, would surely wash away. The remaining drops of rain fell down from the leaves of the plants. They too had drunk enough for today. One could only hope it would stay dry, or at least hope that the rain would hold off until all was safe inside. Christine opened up the blinds to look outside. Another day, the same as every other. Nothing new. No one new. Just equally boring. The world looked so grey and sad. The clouds still hadn't passed by, but at least it was light outside. Or as light as it could be, since most of the clouds blocked the face of the sun. When summer comes, there will be light again. A few more months of rain. A few more months of grey. Luckily for Christine, it was a Saturday. Neither her nor her parents had made plans for the weekend. Finally, some quality time alone. Time in her own little bubble. Well, not exactly little. It was quite big. Bigger than most thought it would be. No one would guess how many worlds were hidden inside of it. Sometimes she would only visit one, sometimes many. They were so much more fun and exciting than the real world. In a way, they felt safe and cozy. She thought to herself why it wasn't possible to live there instead. The universes in her head had so much more color than this one could ever have. They weren't grey. Christine, get under the shower right now! I don't want you to lay in your bed any minute longer. You're not going to sleep a day away and expect me to do everything here. Her mother yelled from the other side of the door and made a loud bang with her fist to make herself clear. Coming! Just pulled up the blinds. She suddenly remembered why everything seemed so colorless. But maybe she just wanted to leave. Of course you did. If I didn't yell at you, you would be still in bed. Now hurry up. Stomping feet left the hallway, back to the room. Now it was Father's problem to deal with. She felt terrible that this was how the weekend was going to start. Even more for her dad, who had to put up with this every day. Her hand reached for the doorknob. The noise was gone. No mother on the other side. She opened up and took a sprint to the small bathroom on the other side of the hall, with clothes in hand. The water felt warm and nice on the skin. The muscles on her shoulders started to relax as it pulled down on top of her. She would rather take a nice long bath, but it wasn't meant to be this weekend. Maybe next week she could lay down and relax with some music in the bathtub. Even so, she felt herself drift away on a cloud. As she stared away into the depths, the bathroom made way for a river. Small creatures flew by that almost seemed to glow. So did the toadstools. Whenever something seemed to touch one, it glowed bright blue. The water of the shower mouth kept raining down on her, but to Christine, it felt as if she stood underneath a waterfall in the middle of a forest. She imagined herself walking forward and reaching for the creatures. Wherever they were going, she was going to follow. As soon as her hand had lifted a little, her mother stormed inside. "Do you have any idea how long you've been standing underneath the shower?" Christine snapped back to reality. It was as if she crash-landed back to earth and needed a second to adjust. Indeed, it was not smart to zone out underneath the shower, but it felt so nice and warm. It was one of those places she loved to daydream. Even though it was so nice and warm, you'd easily get caught in the act. "Well, is anybody home in there?" she said, irritated. Christine realized that she hadn't reacted to her mother's question. She too felt irritated and sad, mostly because the realization usually kicked in after a daydream, what the real world was like, and because she could not go back. "Sorry, I lost time for a bit. I wanted to loosen up my muscles since they feel a bit stiff," she lied. Her mother looked her up and down. "Go shave your legs after you get out. You look like a coconut." With that, she left the bathroom. "Yes, mother," Christine replied with a sigh. Christine plopped her butt on the couch. She breathed deeply in and out. It really was going to be one of those days again. It was already bad enough that they never could have a nice dinner. But a full day of fighting on a Saturday? God, no. "You okay, kiddo?" her father asked from the kitchen. "Yeah, just a little tired." She paused a little before asking, "Did something happen to Mom? She seemed frustrated. Were there any plans we forgot about today?" Her father's face came peeking around the corner, a little alarmed. "Not that I know of. Why?" Christine sat up straight and turned to her father. "Well, she really found it important that I hurried up in the bathroom and got a shower." Her father's eyes widened. "Spring cleaning. We were going to clean the house today." He suddenly sat after a while thinking. "You take care of the rabbit hutch. I will iron the clothing." The day passed by rather quickly. At the end, everyone felt tired and wrecked. The three of them sat down at the dining table with the pizzas they had ordered. "Great job, everyone. The house is as clean as ever," the mother said. Her father laughed and replied, "My back is stiff and painful from working so long in the garden. You don't mind if I lay down a bit after dinner, do you? To give it a rest?" Her mother gave her father a small push and replied, "Oh, you always have something to whine about, don't you? It's fine. I'm going to bed early tonight, so do whatever you please. I want to get enough rest for tomorrow." Christine, her father, gave a loud groan on purpose to tease his wife, and started snickering. Christine, on the other hand, looked a bit confused. She was a little forgetful, but completely forgetting about all the weekend plans was nothing for her. "What are the plans for tomorrow, Mom?" "Your father and I have been invited by friends from work for dinner. You have the house by yourself tomorrow. You may invite a friend over if you like, but I want you to keep all the doors and windows locked. I don't want the same thing to happen to us as what happened to the neighbors a few weeks ago." She was talking about a cat burglar that broke in a few houses away. Strangely enough, nothing was stolen, but there were signs of someone walking through the house. Not to mention, the window of the second story standing wide open. No one knows how the burglar got up there, but no one sleeps with the windows open anymore in the neighborhood. "I promise, I will keep everything close and locked." Her mother nodded and responded, "Good! I would not know what to do if something would happen to you." And with that, the evening came to its end. That night, Christine laid awake in bed. It always took a while to fall asleep, But tonight her head was filled with too many thoughts, so many that she could not close her eyes. Instead, they were fixated on the ceiling above her. The thought of the burglar kept running through her head. There was no way he could come in, right? A scenario started to play, where she sat on the couch, watching a series, and suddenly the door of the garden opened up. A man would walk inside on his tippy toes to make sure no sound was heard. Would he have a weapon? Crowbar? A bat? Maybe a knife? Christine started picturing a man with different types of weapons, until she settled on the crowbar. That would make the most sense if he came in from the back door. She would turn off the TV, stand up and freeze as their eyes meet. Now what would he do? Attack, of course. Leave no witnesses behind. That is what she learned from crime shows. The scenario would end with her getting killed. Slowly, her light would fade as she would fall to the ground. Sweat covered her body. This was not exactly how she wanted to spend the night. It was scary and it became hard to breathe. Then start again. This time he entered through the open window. After all, that is how the burglar entered the house of neighbors. The TV remote fell on the floor as she stood up from the couch. Maybe this time it would be better to take a weapon with her? Yes. There was a heavy frying pan still lying in the kitchen. With a pen in hand, she went upstairs. She was not planning on dying this time, not in her own daydream. The steps of the stairs creaked underneath her feet. There was no way a burglar would not hear her. Her hands seemed to shake as she got upstairs, but as far as she could see in the dark hallway, there was no one there. That is, until someone sneaked up behind her. One hand swiftly grabbed her mouth, another held a knife that was now on her throat. A tear rolled over her cheek. She was going to die again. And so the daydream repeated itself, over and over and over again. She wanted to stop, but her mind forced her to keep going. Christine laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, crying until she became exhausted. When she finally snapped out of the repeated daydream, she calmed down a bit and fell asleep. Sleep, however, did not last long. Her eyes slowly opened again early in the morning. Her room was still engulfed with darkness. The sun hadn't come up. Christine, her mind, drifted back off her own wonderland the moment she chose to open her eyes. That was a terrible mistake. Her mind wanted to go back so badly, especially after the horrible dream she had before. There was nothing more she wanted than going back to the forest she had been yesterday. Peace, quiet, and maybe she could talk with the fawns and listen to the music. No, she thought, that's not what I need. I have to go back to sleep. She laid there for another good half an hour. Time seemed to fly when she daydreamed. It was almost scary to her sometimes, how much time she had lost on a daily basis. Sometimes she could spend hours upon hours in them. After all, each and every one of them had the complex stories and characters she loved and cared for. Sometimes they even felt like her friends. Then again, it was kind of sad that she rather talked to them than her real friends. She didn't dislike her friends, not at all. It was so much easier to drift off when she felt distressed or just bored. Christine finally managed to sit up and rubbed her eyes. What am I doing to myself? She thought. It was not like she was doing it on purpose this time. More like she fell asleep and woke up in these daydreams. They had become part of her sleeping schedule, and that did not make her happy. Her eyes drifted off to her alarm clock, hoping it was not early as usual. It was 6 in the morning. Part of her felt relief, since it wasn't too bad for the weekend. She remembered waking up at 2 in the morning, times, and being unable to fall back to sleep. She continued to let herself drop back down on the bed. The bed creaked when her body made impact on it. Then another noise was heard. Christine looked up and scanned the room. It looked empty to her, nothing out of place. It wasn't until she saw a small figure had toppled over. Its feet were always a weak point, so it was about to happen at some point. The thing would scare her during the night. She sighed in relief. Her head fell back down on a pillow. It was time to try and make herself comfy in the hopes of falling asleep again. If she would not fall asleep in 2 hours, then maybe she would just go downstairs and watch a series instead. Light started seeping inside of her room, bit by bit. The grandfather clock sounded off in the hallway downstairs. It was time to get up. Christine put on a pair of slippers and sneaked downstairs. Suddenly, her eyes were met with those of her father's. The two looked confused for a slight second. "So, what are you doing downstairs? Trouble sleeping again?" He broke the silence. Christine was taken aback. He hit the hammer on the nail. It had been like this for a while, the sleepless nights. "Yes," she answered, and stared at the floor to break eye contact. "Have you figured out why? Maybe it's stress, or maybe you need a new pillow? We can go online if you like. We'll go to the store. Maybe they'll let you try them out." She looked back up and felt guilty when her father started talking about buying a new pillow. No, that's not it. Thank you, but you don't have to buy that for me. My pillow's just fine." He put his hand on her head and ruffled her greasy hair. "Your mother and I are getting worried about you, dear. If this gets worse, you need to see a doctor. Maybe you can get pills to sleep better." They both let out a sigh. "Coffee?" he asked. "Yeah, that would be nice," she answered him. Around 5 in the afternoon, Christine and her parents decided to leave. The house fell silent after the car rolled out onto the road and drove off. She pulled out her phone and started texting her friend. It was a bit late, but she could at least give it a go. As expected, her answer was no. She had unexpected guests coming over, and certainly could not leave. Christine felt a little upset, but understood. The rest of the evening progressed slowly, with a sketchbook on the couch and music playing from the radio. A dirty plate still stood on the coffee table. The thought of putting it in the dishwasher still hadn't crossed her mind. She was too fixated on finishing the sketch she had started. It wasn't going too well. The eraser moved over the paper again, removing the hands from the fairy. She didn't want to think about it yet, when she had to start on the feet. Those are even harder to draw. Maybe it was for the best to put it aside and do something else. It clearly wasn't getting any better, as she was starting to fear that the paper might rip next time she erased a part of the drawing. Christine heard a noise above the music, but could not place what it was or where it was. She did not remember the song to contain something like that. With the remote, she muted the radio, and the house felt silent once again. Only now did she notice how dark it had gotten. It really was this late already? A shock of adrenaline pumped through her as the memory of the burglar came back. "No," she spoke softly, and quickly covered her mouth. She felt like cursing, for suddenly saying that out loud, it was already too late. Footsteps were heard from the hall that moved towards the living room. Quickly, Christine grabbed a hold of the knife that was on her plate. It made a soft clinking noise when she picked it up in a hurry. There was no place for her to hide, so she ended up standing there, with a small knife in the hopes to surprise the person who broke in. Her eyes widened when a man zoomed out of the darkness. Something seemed to glitter, but it was too dark to see until he stepped into the lamplight. Paralyzed with fear, Christine dropped her knife as all of her muscles in her body seemed to give out. Her knees felt wobbly and it was hard to stand up straight. The man was holding her side. Her heart beat somewhere in her throat as it could jump out at any moment. There was no way she could win against something like that. She was going to die. The man finally spoke up as he stepped closer towards her. "So, we finally meet. I'm glad that after watching you for so long I can finally talk to you." He had been watching her? For how long? Where? How? More panic arose inside of her body. Her legs gave out and she fell backwards on her butt. The man looked at his side and then back at the young woman in front of him. "Is this scaring you?" He pointed at his blade. He seemed confused. Christine nodded her head slowly. "Oh, sorry for that. Everyone has one where I come from. Don't worry though. They are self-defense and to protect others." He proceeded to put the weapon against the wall. It glittered even more. Whoever made the weapon did a beautiful job at it. There were gemstones embedded in the staff and blade. It made her wonder if they were real, since that would be nearly impossible, at least to her. The man walked up to her with a stern look on his face. "Get up, or at least sit on the couch. Sitting on the floor won't do you any good." He crouched down to meet her eye level. She got a feeling as if the man was getting impatient with her. He reached a hand towards her and tilted his head to the side. A smile appeared on his face, as if to say that everything was going to be fine, until his facial expression turned into shock. Without pardon, he placed both hands on Christine's face. Her eyes went wide. There was no telling who was more in shock, her or the man. He tilted her head from side to side and eventually pulled her lower eyelids down. "Sir, what are you doing?" The man continued and started forcing her eyes wide open. "Checking your eyes? They should not look like this," he said with a panic in his voice. Christine prayed to God that her parents would come home soon. It was no burglar, but probably a man from a psych hospital who had escaped. Defeated, he let go of her face and stood up. The man started to walk circles around the coffee table, shouting, "No, not a mallet! After protecting you every night, you got infected by a mallet!" He pointed his finger at Christine, who slowly crawled back towards the wall. "What's a mallet?" she asked, playing along with the man that stood a few feet away from her. He pointed his finger up and dropped it as if he wasn't entirely sure himself. "Hold up, I'll show you what the little bastard looks like." He started fumbling around in one of the pockets of his coat, then switched to the other pocket, only to pull a weird device from it, with yet another crystal embedded into it. As soon as he switched it on, a hologram was projected from the crystal. It looked like a woman, with beautiful dark hair. "Is that a mallet?" Christine asked. The man started pushing buttons and swiped away on the crystal. "No, but she is one monster of a woman." He winked away. With that, Christine assumed that it must have been his lover, or a woman he held dear. "Ah, there it is. Take a look for yourself." A weird slimy creature popped up out of the crystal. The man touched the crystal to turn it around. It looked horrifying and really big. Her hand reached out towards the hologram. "That is a mallet. If I am affected with that. Does that mean... She paused for a moment. That thing is inside of me. Christine started to touch up her body, trying to feel lumps of weird spots. Don't worry, I'm going to bring you to a healer who can remove it from your body. I won't forgive myself if I let you spiral down this rabbit hole any further. He held his hands out and tried to calm her down. Tears started to roll down Christine's cheeks. She felt that something tried pulling her back into a safety bubble. A place with peace and quiet. No screaming people. No intruders. No scary monsters. Shit! How long has that thing been inside you? Your tears are filled with its goo. It's overdosing you. He picked her up in his arms. A determined look appeared on his face. Whoever he was, he had made it his mission to save the young woman. I don't know, she cried. A red light lit up the room. Everything happened so fast. All she could see was a rip that became bigger and bigger as it opened up. Inside was dark, like an empty void that seemed to look back at her the more she stared at it. Please, I don't want to go in there. I'm scared. The man looked her in the eyes. You don't have to be scared. I'll always be with you to protect you. Therefore, I am your Dream Reaper. He stepped through the portal with the woman in his arms, and so the house fell silent.